For the Pittsburgh Steelers, they've had plenty of headlines this weekend. I think the biggest one is Bud Dupree signing with the Atlanta Falcons, a 1-year deal opposed to a 2-year deal that the Pittsburgh Steelers reportedly offered him. Heads to Atlanta. I think the Steelers kind of looked at that as a lock. In the meantime, they released Jameer Jones. They're down to Quincy Roche as their only backup outside linebacker at this moment. I mean, you're looking at this situation. Are you as confused as I am? Are you as, there's somewhat of alerts, sirens kind of going off in my head going, what are they doing here? This is kind of worse than last offseason.
Yeah, I was gonna say this. I was just thinking that this gives me shades of like last year, sort of with the defensive line, but mostly like, I mean, there were a lot of other positions where they did this at where you just you went into the offseason saying, okay, they need to make moves here, here, and here, and then time keeps marching on. Guys keep coming off the board in terms of like free agents, that can actually be valuable assets, and the Steelers are just sitting there making. They haven't made no moves, but
almost no moves. Not on the outside linebacker. I
right.
mean, they're right now. It's Quincy Roche. Like and I think the big thing here is, you look at the situation with Jameer Jones and people are like, oh, it's because they're doing this. They're doing that. I don't know. Like, I don't know what the reason to release Jameer Jones is in March or in April, and it doesn't make any sense. But there's got to be a reason behind it. Like, either he asked for a release or something came up, an injury. I don't know what it is, but you don't just you don't sign somebody in February and then in April after you've played no football or made any signings. And even if you did make a signing, what is a 1-year veteran minimum deal that you could cut in training camp if he doesn't make the roster, and you're not losing any cap space. It doesn't make any sense to release him. So there's got to be a reason. There's got to be a reason. Jerry Dulac quoted my tweet or tweeted at me and said, oh, maybe there's always a reason. And I was like, oh, okay, Jerry knows something we don't. So there's something had to happen. But when it comes to Dupree, I mean, I don't know. Like, I just kind of looked at that and said it had to be a lock. They had to think it was a lock. And now that it's not, like, where do you even go from there? If you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, what are you doing right now?
Right. Like, I don't know. Dupree seemed like, because the thing is, they do need some depth too, but like I don't know. They need some, especially at outside linebacker. They needed kind of a big name. They needed a guy who could contribute right away, and just the guys left on the board, like just looking at, over the cap, edge defenders or defensive linemen, like it's slim pickings out there. Like, it is not really, like, between, I don't know. So at the top of the, like, there's, after Dupree, there's Leonard Floyd and Frank Clark, Deion Jones, Robert Quinn. I don't know if they're going to be willing to pay a guy like that.
No, I think that's
And
my
then,
biggest thing right now is that, like, Frank Clark going to be too expensive. Leonard Floyd going to be too expensive. Justin Houston, old and expensive.
right.
Carl Nassib doesn't play the same position. Mario Addison doesn't play the same position. Robert Quinn, old.
Well,
Like,
and then just the drop off then to like Zach Cunningham or
yes,
Jadeveon
exactly.
Clowney. Like, there's no in between here between the guys who are going to be the, quote unquote elite guys who are going to be way too expensive versus these guys who might be worth a backup role and might be able to do that for you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you are now faced, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, with a situation where you could sign one of these guys and say, okay, well, this is good depth, better than, last training camp when they walked in there with Derek Tushka as their guy. And we were making a big deal out of Deontay Scott and being like, these two are going to lead the way as the Steelers backups. Yikes. You look at it now, you could sign one of those guys. You could go out and sign a lower free agent that isn't going to make huge impact, but then you still got to draft somebody. And at that point, you're using a draft pick on a position that I think you already kind of thought you had filled. Like, you weren't prepared for this if you were the Pittsburgh Steelers, and maybe they were, but in my eyes, they were not. Like, they thought, and again, I don't know what happened with Jameer Jones. I don't think that the Steelers just cut him because they were like, oh, well, we only want 3 edge rushers going into training camp. We don't want, or going into the NFL draft. We don't want 4. I don't know why they cut him, but I think a week ago they looked at this situation and said, oh, we'll have Bud Dupree, we'll have Jameer Jones, we'll have Quincy Roche. We could probably draft somebody in the middle to the late rounds of the draft, and we could feel pretty good. Right now, they got to be looking at this and going, we might have to draft somebody in the second round. We might have to draft somebody in the third round.
Right.
Where are you
I
going?
was gonna say it puts so much pressure on the draft now. If you're not gonna make a move for the draft in less than 2 weeks and a week and a
Yeah.
half, you're kind of SOL, and you've got to you've either got to reach for an edge rusher at a pick that you probably don't want to do that at, or you're taking one of these lower tier, like second or third tier free agents,
Yeah.
which are becoming like fewer and further between. Like the longer you wait, the like worse your sign is going to be. Quite frankly, like
Yeah.
you're just not going to get someone. I don't know. I feel like the price is only going to go up for edge rushers. The fewer of them are left on the board, especially for the Steelers, who people know need one.
Yeah.
They're not
Exactly.
making, with time will not make this any easier on themselves.
No, and you look at who they brought in for pre-draft visits. Like if you're like, oh well, they're minimum homework on them. Just to be totally honest, they've done minimal. They brought in Tula Pelota, excuse me, from USC, Robert Beal from Georgia, and then Felix, I can never pronounce his last name, Uzoma out of Kansas State, which they're all quality edge rushers. They're probably all second or third round guys. But you've only draft visits. You've gone to pro days. You've done your homework on names like Lucas Van Ness. But Lucas Van Ness, you're going to have to trade up for that. According to 93.7 The Fans, Andrew Filipponi, that's an option for them. But to make a move for your backup edge rusher, that just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Like what's the plan there? That's where I'm confused. There is no detailed plan in any of this. Like there's no point where you're like, oh, okay, well, at least they have a backup plan here. They have a backup plan there. Like for every other position, you could kind of go through and say, oh, okay, well, this seems to be their plan here. This seems to be their plan there. For edge rusher, this is like 4 years in a row that it's just been like, yeah, well, you know what,
Whatever happens.
Yeah, that's just like, we'll just trade for another Malik Reed at the beginning of the season. And hopefully that works out for us.
Right.
Hopefully TJ Watt stays healthy for a whole season, even though that hasn't happened in 2 years.
Right. And then midway through the year, we're all sitting around like, oh man, they can't get any pressure on the quarterback. They can't defend the run. They can't. And it's like, yeah, because you have one starting caliber or outside linebacker, or you have,
Yep.
You don't have.
And you have to, at this point, you have to sign somebody, convince them that they're only going to play 20 snaps a game, and pray that nobody gets hurt. And if they do get hurt, you're screwed. This is, the Steelers have almost gone full circle. Like when DJ first came in here and what's his name? Anthony Chickillo was the backup linebacker. Like Anthony Chickillo held no value to this team whatsoever. And the Steelers just continuously rocked with them as him, Dupree, TJ Watt. That was their outside linebackers. And like it stunk. It wasn't a good mix, but it was consistent and it was better than what they've been rocking with since then. You didn't think you could get worse than Anthony Chickillo. Like you think you got down farther than that, especially for a team that values edge rusher like the Steelers do. They have found themselves the last 2 seasons in a much worse spot at edge rusher. Like it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and they haven't continued, like that position hasn't gotten healthier since that. Like
that's the thing. TJ's getting hurt. Alex Highsmith's getting older, and TJ's getting hurt these days. Like not just like kind of hurt. Like he's getting hurt these days.
Right. He's not rolling ankles. He's
yeah.
This is his pec. He's like tore his pec. That's like not
Yep. Exactly. The year before it was like 4 hamstring injuries. Like it's just they're starting to add up. You're starting to hit that point in his career where you're like, oh, okay, like is TJ still the best player on your team? Hands down. But at the same time, if he's not out there, you need to have somebody that could replace him that you feel comfortable with. And that should have been such a high priority on this list. And it just was not, it just was not. Unless they go out and get a guy like Frank Clark or, Justin Houston or whoever. But like, that even reminds you of the Melvin Ingram days when they brought Melvin Ingram in. And then by week 8, Melvin Ingram asked for a trade because I'm not playing. Like I'm never on the field. And it's like, you hope that that's the case, that the backup outside linebacker is never on the field. But you have to have somebody that's good enough that, he could be on the field if need be.
Right.
It's not going to be a guy like Frank Clark. It's just not. It's not going to be a guy like Leonard Floyd. It's not going to be a guy like Jadeveon Clowney or Justin Houston, like or Carl Dunlap or Robert Quinn. It's just not going to be those guys. Like you've Bud Dupree would have been that guy, and he would have been comfortable. You should have offered him a 1-year deal. If I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers, if I want to put the blame on somebody here, I put it on the Pittsburgh Steelers. A 1-year deal for Bud Dupree, in my opinion, makes more sense just because you have that opportunity to go sign a bigger deal next offseason, somewhat of a prove it year. And, to not budge on that just, what are you trying? What's the difference? 1 to 2, you're trying to solve this long term. If you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, why?
Right.
Just go do it again next year if you need to.
Right. And yeah, exactly. Like you had options open. You could see what Bud Dupree was when at his age 30. Is he turning 31 this year? I think he turns 31. He's 30 this year.
He's 30 this year. He'll be 31. I think he just turned 30 not long ago. So I think next offseason he'll be 31. And I mean, but by next season he'll be pushing 32. If you're Bud Dupree, you're hoping for one more deal, a 3-year deal after this one that's worth some change. And if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you have to know that, that you have to see that this guy's not going for a 2-year deal. It just doesn't make any sense for him, especially if it's a hometown discount deal. I think that's all nonsense, but I don't know. Bad move for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Strange spot to be in if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers right now. Didn't see this one coming. Could say that. Didn't see it coming at all.